this series, 10 Ways to Please God, and this is session 1, Putting God First. I'm basing this series on the 10 Commandments, and of course the first one is, you shall have no other gods before me. Now that's a fairly straightforward statement, and most of us will probably say, well, I'm fine with that. I don't worship any other gods. Now we may not worship wooden idols, but do we put God first? God is our creator, the creator of all life, and so he has priority in all that we do. And yet how often we find ourselves controlled by other things in our lives. Putting God first can be costly. Have the story in the Old Testament where Abraham was asked by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. Now Isaac was a child promised to Abraham and Sarah in their old age, and he was the one through whom the promise to Abraham of becoming the father of many nations was to come about. Well, Abraham obeyed God to the point where he had Isaac bound and on the altar, and that's when God stopped him and provided a ram for sacrifice. Now this would have been a terrible thing for Abraham to contemplate, and yet he was willing to give up all in obedience to God. In the world today, there are many for whom allegiance to Jesus may mean being shunned by their family, even threat of death from their family. For them, putting God first is very costly. Now, we're not likely to face such extremes here, but we do need to be careful that we aren't putting things ahead of God. For example, do we do things we know are not pleasing to God because we want to please our family instead? We want to keep the peace? Do we let self rule what we're doing? If we believe God has asked us to do a particular job, do we reject it because we don't think we have the time, or it's a bit too much demand on our energy, or maybe it's a little bit below our dignity, or it may be that it would involve a lot less income and we're not prepared to give that up? Do we let tradition or religion decide what we do or don't do rather than asking God? Now, religion is man-made rules, and these rules and traditions can become so ingrained that we don't really realise they're not necessarily of God. Now there's the story of the guru's cat. Whenever the guru sat down to worship, his cat would come in and disturb the worshippers. So the guru ordered that the cat be tied up whenever worship was on. After the guru died, they continued to tie the cat up. When the cat died, they got another cat and they tied it up while worship was going on. And then centuries later, the learned treatises were written by scholarly followers of this guru on the liturgical significance of tying up a cat during worship. We can let traditions get out of hand. God always comes first, and all the cost may seem great at the time, it will always be worth it. You shall have no other God before me.
Glory and honor to God. Glory and honor forever. Glory and honor to God. Glory and honor belong to He who formed the heavens
Now there's a story, and I'm not sure how true it is, of the guru who, whenever he worshipped, his cat would come and he would... I can't compete with that.
Keep going.
Sorry about that.